This episode of Love Larn is sponsored by Scott Bonnar Fabrication and Parts.
I was thinking about doing these bearing housings next, but I'm actually going to get this rear roller sprocket out of the way because I want to make sure that this shaft and the bearings and the bearing clamps, etc., are all the way home on that shaft. So this is the sprocket, the bottom sprocket for the intermediary clutch, etc. It's basically slots on that shaft. It can be a little bit tight coming off, so I'm expecting it's going to be tight going on. Requires a small Woodruff key fitted into the slot of the shaft. This slot's actually a little bit on the messy side. It's not terrible, it's just a little bit gunged up, which will do. And you notice on this sprocket there's a one half, this bit sort of sticks out, and this half it doesn't stick out. So we're going to mount that so that the sticky outy side fits into the machine. And as far as it will go, we'll give it a tap to help it along. And it's a snug fit, as I said, so I'm going to pop a little bit of grease on there. As usual. To start with, I'm going to get a little bit of grease on this Woodruff key slot, and I won't put any more at this stage. My reason for doing that is I just don't want that Woodruff key to seize into place. On the 17-inch machine there was no getting that thing out of there. Ended up having to have a new slot cut, so it was a complete and utter nightmare. Yeah, if I had a bit of heat and maybe some different tools, it might have been a different story, but in the end it was just a nightmare. So if I ever need to pull this out again, I want to make sure that it's going to behave itself. Now that key's got a fair ways to go, I believe, before it will allow us to get that sprocket back on there. It's sitting quite far forward in the slot as well, so it's not positioned ideally. So worst case, I'll pull that back out if it will come out, and just give it a bit of a sanding. It's looking a bit better now, so I'm just going to check the alignment before we commit. Still sitting a little bit proud. It's back in there where it needs to be. Just a little bit on the high side still. There we go. Bit of lining up to do, but I think that's gonna do the trick. I'm using a lot of grease on this project. When I cleaned up this machine there was a lot of grease on it and it was really disgusting, as you heard me exclaim, no doubt, and I don't want to recreate that situation, but I think a lot of that mess was from the chains in particular, and realistically speaking I just want to make sure that I'm using grease where it needs to be used, and not where it's not necessary. Alright. as I mentioned, the outy bit of that's pointing in. And I'm just going to press that as far in as it will go. There's a, be impossible to show you in the camera, but there's a tiny little gap between the sort of little step section and the chassis, so I think that's probably about right how we've got it. I'll give it a knock anyway. And that's looking pretty good, I reckon. Pull off the sawdust, washer, nut. Now, the thread on this shaft is a little bit iffy. I know it goes because I've run it in before. It will just go easy with that one. It is a 3/4 inch bolt. And it feels good. It's a little bit tricky getting this one tightened up because everything's trying to move. If you've watched the disassembly teardown video, you'll recall I placed the long screwdriver in one of the holes of the rear roller and then use that to prevent everything moving around. I think the easiest option is just to get all the chains in place and use the clutch and maybe block out the front roller to get to hold everything in place, put the engine on it maybe, and then tighten this up. Of course, we've got good access to it right now, and once the large sprocket is on there, it does tend to get in the way a little bit. So you can still access that bolt. It's just probably going to be easiest if we can get it as good as we can now rather than later. I'm pretty happy with that. The alignment was better than I was expecting it was going to be. I thought, looking at that shaft, the Woodruff key slot was a little bit, was sitting just a tiny fraction into the chassis there, and I was worried that I wasn't going to have enough thread on that axle poking at the other end once this nut was in place, but that's a couple of threads there at least. Alright, let's move on to the bearing housings next.